Unbelievable stuff from George Russell. The man is proving once again why he is worthy and deserving of a brand new contract at Mercedes. And who knows, by the time this video comes out, they might have already put pen to paper. They might have already broken the news that George Russell is sticking and staying with Mercedes in the near future. I mean, the guy was simply brilliant in Singapore. He did so well to get on pole position on Saturday, and he did even phenomenally well to hold that lead and win the race on Sunday. George Russell, I think this season has been nothing short of phenomenal. And when I actually think since Lewis Hamilton has left, I think this is a man who has taken the reins at Mercedes. He has really put the leadership on his shoulders. He's not shirked away from any responsibility whatsoever. George Russell has been absolutely brilliant. We have to give credit where credit is due. This is a man who is more than worthy of winning a championship. He's more than worthy of having an extended contract at Mercedes. He's more than worthy of being the #1 driver at Mercedes. I think George Russell has been absolutely phenomenal this entire year. If you look back as well to Baku, when it wasn't a great qualifying session, the guy was actually sick. He had flu, and he still got on the podium in Baku, and that was not something that was talked about much. And much of George Russell's performances in 2025 is of this caliber. It's where nobody's really talking about him, but you see him pop up with such an important result, with such a good result at the end of the race weekend. When you look at his whole weekend in general, this is a man where they showed a feature of him on Sky about, you know, him and Anthony Davidson were cycling around the Singapore track, and just some of the things that he was talking about on the track, some of the things that he was acknowledging and talking about the characteristics of Singapore was something that made me think, do you know what, man, this guy, like, the wheel knowledge is unreal. Like, he's and the thing is, it's easy to think that drivers, Formula One drivers, may or may not know like the little ins and outs of like how a bump goes or how a turn is. Maybe they just care about the driving, and that's what the engineers are there for. But George Russell, man, this guy takes it to the wire. He goes straight down to the curb, and he knows exactly. He was analyzing every single thing. He was talking about how the one tire sort of rolls over a drain cover, so therefore when it comes to braking, you might lock and you might kind of run off the track and stuff like that. And it was just the way he explained certain corners in Singapore was really, really brilliant. And then for him to be the man that got pole position and then won the race in one of the most trickiest conditions possible. This is a Grand Prix race where we're talking about 31 degrees air temperature. This is a race that's at nighttime, by the way. So imagine nighttime, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock p.m. Local time, and it's 31 degrees outside. Then you're in a Formula One car, which is also another 30 degrees on top in terms of the cockpit and everything else of that nature. So you can imagine how hot that they must feel. This is the circuit where people, famously Lewis Hamilton on the Graham Norton show, said that, you know, he's lost as much as 4 kilos in that race because of the intensity of the race, because of the G-force and the sheer sweat, the amount of water that they lose on their body from the sheer sweating. So drinking water, of course, throughout the race is critically important. So with one of the toughest races that there is on the calendar, and there's many, many tough races, the way George Russell has executed, it's not something we can just shy about. It's not something we can just gloss over and talk as if, yeah, this is normal. Because it's not normal, guys. This is not normal. The way George Russell is and the way he has performed is not normal. This is actually really, really, really good stuff. And it's a shame that he's not in a McLaren maybe, or even in a Red Bull, where often he gets to show what his talent is. When he's showing his talent in a Mercedes, it seems to kind of just slip under the radar. And whether that's the fact that, you know, Lewis Hamilton leaving Mercedes, maybe the popularity of Mercedes has gone down quite a bit. And obviously all attention is now put on the eyes of Ferrari, like they needed any more attention, okay? One of the most popular teams, if not the popular team in Formula One, one of the most popular teams in sports. So seeing George Russell being able to muster these results and really push, honestly, like if he says that, look, this season is not the there's no added motivation in terms of, you know, getting a new contract while he's performing so well. There isn't a motivation for him. It's like every single time I want to win. When the helmet is on and the visor is down, this is the quality, this is the character that George Russell has. This is the ambition, this is the mentality that he comes with. So George Russell is not necessarily just trying to do things for his contract. George Russell is doing things for himself in terms of how he can perform at the very best, how he can do extremely well in order to win races, in order to hopefully be in a title challenge and win championships. It would be a shame, it would be a travesty to not see George Russell ever in a title race. It's one thing we must see, because I think he would definitely throw, you know, the cat amongst the pigeons, as the term goes. I think he will really start to, you know, really confuse the pack. he will really ruffle some feathers. And because of how good he is. Like, George Russell actually is very, very good. And is probably, of the top drivers that we all talk about, the one less talked about, probably the most underrated of the lot. And weekends like this come to show it, because even when he was having a decent qualifying session, he didn't go pole once. He went twice, in terms of, he took provisional pole, then he beat his own time the second run and got pole position again. Obviously, you know, stayed pole position, and nobody else could catch him. And when you look at the season that, say, McLaren are having, or like, you know, the car that McLaren have, more than capable of getting pole positions. They've been rinsing poles all season. When you think that Max Verstappen, even in this year's Red Bull, even though it's got a few upgrades now, even in this Red Bull, like, Max Verstappen couldn't get that pole position ahead of George Russell. We know what Charles Leclerc is like. We know how aggressive he is when it comes to qualifying sessions. One of the best in the business, and he couldn't do it. But George Russell did it. And it's a massive credit to him. This guy has done more than enough. He's done more than enough to convince people of a new contract at Mercedes. And at the end of the day, it's got to be, you know, people like Toto Wolff are the ones who make this decision. They are the ones who turn around and say whether or not, you know, George Russell is worthy of this championship. George Russell is worthy of driving for Mercedes. George Russell is worthy of being the number one driver at Mercedes. And don't get me wrong, Kimi Antonelli had a good weekend as well. Like, he finished P5 in the Singapore Grand Prix. That's really good when you consider that Verstappen was P2 and the Mercedes and the McLarens were 3 and 4 with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. So Kimi Antonelli had a good race, finishing ahead of the Ferraris. Good stuff. You know, Tsunoda was nowhere to be found. So be it. George, however, is an indication of the hard work is paying off. And it's just good to see him win a race this season. I think he's more than deserved of a race. And Singapore is one of those race circuits that I think in the last 4 years, we've had 4 different winners, or 5 years, we've had 5 different winners. So 6 years now and a 6th different winner. It's absolutely brilliant. It's great to see. We always seem to get somebody new. Lando was last year. The year before that was Carlos Sainz. We seem to always get a new one. And I think Mercedes, this is their first win in Singapore since 2018. I can't think back to when they last had a win in Singapore. So that's good for Mercedes, right? That's absolutely top notch. But I'm just giving, you know, showing some love and showing some praise to George Russell, because I think it's more than warranted. It's more than deserved. We've made countless videos already on this channel regarding the contract of it all and what Toto Wolff has been doing and not been doing. What on earth is Mercedes doing with this contract negotiation? I think we can come to that conclusion that George Russell will sign a new deal with Mercedes. It is a matter of when, and there might be some, you know, contract clauses that might need to be stretched and ironed out. Maybe that's what's going through, taking the length of time. It's the whole lawyer process of it all. And then if it is, so be it. Let it be that case. But in the end, I think George Russell has put a statement down, because even though the other, you know, we're talking about Oscar Piastri, we're talking about Lando Norris in terms of the championship, and then we're talking about Max Verstappen as like the third wheel trying to mess things up. I think we have to also now talk about George Russell, because it's not that he's just been doing this like, oh, only last week or only this week. It's not. That's not even the case. George Russell has been doing really, really well. And it's a credit to him. It's a credit to him of how great he's been. He's P4 in the Drivers' Championship. Like, bear in mind, he's ahead of Charles Leclerc. He's ahead of Lewis Hamilton. He's ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in the other Red Bull. He's just behind Max Verstappen. And the thing is as well, you know, Mercedes are ahead of Ferrari in the constructors. That's not cheap. That's not rubbish. You know, I think Russell's about, maybe 40 points or something like that. 40 points behind Max Verstappen. But all it takes in these last couple of races of the year, a couple of DNFs, or maybe a couple of more race wins, George Russell's right in the thick of it. So, yeah, George Russell's done a phenomenal job. He's done more than enough to really cement himself as the number one man at Mercedes. And that's a big title because of who he's overtaken, whose place he has taken since that time. And I want to see this contract get done and finish. And I want to see what George Russell can do, what he will do in that Mercedes, because it's important to keep those kind of drivers in there. It would be a travesty to see George Russell get wasted away or moved around the market. I don't think he should be going anywhere unless it was like to a better team. You know, I don't think we want to see George Russell end up maybe going at an Aston Martin or, you know, scrambling for position because of what's taking place at Mercedes. We don't want to see any of that. So George Russell has done absolutely brilliant. He was phenomenal in Singapore and he's been phenomenal all season. P4 in the Drivers' Championship, when you consider all things, he's done absolutely brilliant. He's done absolutely brilliant. If you think George Russell deserves his contract, if you think George Russell, you know, has done enough, then let me know in the comment section down below. If you like Formula 1 content like this, make sure you smash a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you like more Formula 1 content. YouTube thinks you'll like this video over here, so make sure you go ahead and click on that. And until next time, lights out.